What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Jordan Kurtz here with the Colorado Jiu-Jitsu Club, sitting alongside Paprocki. We are bringing you the CJJC 28 post-show presented to you by Matt Ratz. We had a slate of entertaining matchups all throughout the card, from the early prelims all the way through the main event finish. We had a show within the show with a four-man bracket. Had somebody take home some cash in the process, a little bit of extra coin for the holiday season. We're going to get into all of that throughout this show, but first and foremost, please hit that like, share, and subscribe button so you do not miss a drop. Kat, how you doing today?
There is not enough coffee in the world for me today. How are you?
Well, you've already gone through a couple of
I know.
I can imagine on that side.
I'm like, I have anxiety. I should drink more coffee.
Funny how that works, folks. Funny how that works.
So let's do this show.
But without further ado, let's dive into this main card here. In the main event, we had a 205-pound Nogi matchup between tried and true veteran of the CJJC cage. He has moved his record and continued on the unblemished streak. That is Cody Brundage out of Factory X. He took on Logan Weintraub out of Easton Training Center. Hey, Logan put up a valiant contest throughout all of regulation, but once it came to overtime, it was all Cody in that finish.
Logan is the first competitor, though, that made Cody pull out some tools that I haven't seen yet. He had such an active guard. He was always threatening things, throwing up stuff. It was exciting.
Definitely, and I think that also from Cody's side of things, to piggyback off of that, or to maybe play a bit of devil's advocate, Cody was a little bit more active also in the process, because some of the critiques, if you will, that people had from maybe some of the other matchups was, well, yeah, I'm just not going to give you my legs or give you an opportunity. So as long as I'm anchoring on top, which is a lot more of a traditional, a wrestling or an MMA mindset, well, if I'm on top, you're not winning in a lot of ways. But there were maybe some of the people who said, well, this guy on the bottom is trying to be active. Well, Cody was also trying to be a lot more active from the top this time and trying to forge for his own openings. And credit to Logan, throughout regulation, those didn't present themselves. But once it got to overtime, I mean, I'll tell you this, Cody is one strong dude. I mean, all the way around. It doesn't matter what we're looking at. He has $50,000 performance bonuses for powerbomb finishes in the UFC.
Yeah.
So somebody like that, that's a different level of strength. And, it's not to say that Logan hasn't experienced that strength before, but somebody who has that level of horsepower along with a mean streak in him, that's something that's very tough to have to deal with. And with this being a head and arm triangle, as soon as I saw Cody get the setup from the back and start to weave the arm through, I knew it was only a matter of time before it was a wrap. That's just too big of a guy with too strong of a squeeze to not be able to finish that from that point.
Well, and the night of our show, they finally announced that he's fighting January 31st. So also noticing Cody's fine-tuning things now. He had even said that prior to weigh-ins, he had sparring. So, yeah, man, he is dialed in.
Oh, yeah, and we had Dustin Jacoby, the Hanyak, on the call for that matchup, and Dustin's also going to be on that same card with him down in Australia fighting Jimmy the Brute Crute, so it was fun, and Dustin loved being able to hop on. He said, hey, I wasn't really expecting to hop on the call, and but at the same time, it was great to come into the venue, and he said he was just experiencing a bunch of love and reception from the fans as soon as he walked in, so hey, it's great to feel some appreciation in the process, but it's also, just to give a shout out to Dustin real quick, it's a kudos to who he is as a person. Dustin is one of those guys who he's kind of that salt of the earth type of guy.
Yes,
it doesn't matter whether you are somebody who is in the early stages of the game or you're somebody who is on a grand scale. Dustin is going to be a good guy all the way around. He's a kind person, and he even said it on the broadcast, hey, I believe very firmly that the people that you see on the way up are going to be some of the same ones that you see on the way down, so be kind in the process. And all the way back to when I was just a young pup in the game, almost God, crazy, it's how much time flies, but damn near 10 years ago, coming into the gym, and here's Dustin, this guy who has fought for Glory World titles, who was in the UFC earlier in his career at one point, very globally recognized person already in the fight game at that time, nowhere near even close to the status that he is now, but still just being a young guy, oh man, this is Dustin Jacoby. He just comes up what's up, man, I'm Dustin. Just him being so personable all the way along and with everybody and with the fans. I love seeing a guy like him get the love and appreciation that he does because he deserves it.
Yeah, yeah. What I loved was that he was commentating and yelling out instructions to Cody at the same time.
Yeah, and obviously some people might have a little faux pas to that, but at the same time, Justin wasn't prepared to be.
No, he was great. He did so great. He
Joe in the process.
Yeah, man, he was just himself.
That's his guy,
Yeah,
Cody, they're corners for each other whenever they fight.
Okay.
They're everyday training partners,
Yeah.
so they're already kind of connected at the hip in that way. So
Yeah.
I can totally understand in that moment of him wanting to just
Absolutely.
well, I'm kind of having to separate myself from having a headset and being kind of a corner and a ride. But hey, I appreciate it. It's not like we don't have to worry about the commission on that side of things. Like when Joe Warren was way back when.
Yes,
It's great to see. But moving along from that matchup, in our co-main event, we had a tech sub that put one man to sleep. I mean, he was out for a little bit of a second there. It was a comeback and a battle through some adversity, if you will, for Alejandro the Hurricane Rodriguez out of Black Sheep University made down there in Colorado Springs. Alejandro it's known now at this point, he even mentioned it in the post-fight interview in the cage, that he has a disc issue. He has a disc implant in his neck. Wow. And a week before the match, his disc slipped. So he was having some neck issues leading into the match. However, he was able to push through it and was still able to compete in the process and goes out there and gets a big win against Tyler Hampton. I think that was a big step for Alejandro, just for himself personally on a competitive standpoint, because he's kind of taken a step away from being a competitor himself and stepped into coaching mode. Yeah. And as a coach, you got to be a lot more selfless versus selfish. Yeah. But he has a tight-knit group of people. He had another one of his athletes on the card. His wife, Jessica Lane, is fighting this weekend as well. So it was kind of just let's all peak right around the same point right before the holidays. So it was good to see that he was able to go out there and find a win in the cage for us. Yeah.
What I noticed was Alejandro was threatening Tyler's air phase from the very start. Mm-hmm. In that first round, man, he had that shoulder pressed in. He had thrown up a guillotine. Even in the first round, Tyler Hampton's head was turning kind of red. So by the time the second round came, what people forget is even if you don't get that sub in the first round, if I've been messing with your air the whole time, some people don't come back from that. So by the time they were into the second, man, he just clamped right back on him.
Definitely, and it was a battle of two different body types. Totally. When you have in that sort of, in some of those short arm chokes or some of those real tight squeeze moments, when somebody is so compact with, lack of a better reference, kind of that pit bull build,
yes,
the way that Alejandro is, well, those squeezes are going to be that much tighter, that much faster, because there's just less space to be able to close down.
Absolutely.
And I think that certainly was an advantage for him as he got to that head and arm triangle and was able to put Tyler to sleep in the process.
Yeah, and he said, give him black belts. So I say, Stephen Paprocki, give Alejandro Rodriguez black belts.
Well, you didn't call him professor either.
So. Oh, well, he's not coaching.
Speaking of, though, this next matchup in the feature bout of the afternoon, we had Zach Lindsay taking on Jason Mullen. Jason Mullen picks up a first-round armbar against Zach Lindsay. Now, hey, all credit to Zach. Zach is a tremendous athlete, former college running back, as an athlete or a family full of athletes. All of his brothers are very gifted physically in that sense. But this was a situation where we talked about it on the pre-show that, if the real Jason Mullen showed up, it was a difference of technical ability in that sense. Jason has been competing for more than 10 plus years at this point. Jason has a plethora of experience from just submission grappling alone. Yep. So that all being said, it's not really a result that surprised me, if you will. Sure. It was more so, it was a matter of, would Jason get in his own head in the process? Because he's had what a lot of people don't see behind the scenes is the adversity that sometimes these competitors and these athletes go through in their personal life or with their families and so on and so forth. Sure. And that's been kind of the story of him for the last couple of years, going through a lot of trials and tribulations. Yeah. But I think that this was a good step for him to kind of rediscover who he is.
Yeah, man, that's one of our goals here we kind of bridge that gap between jujitsu, MMA. Maybe you're an MMA fighter and you're struggling, so you need to just take a step back from that, but still stay active. Man, Jason's vulnerability afterwards really spoke. Um, man, I see a lot of my story in his, and MMA can just grind you down, and people forget that we are humans too, and there is so much happening. On Zach's side, I was bummed that Zach didn't follow a game plan better. We knew that Zach had safety when he was on a cage. I was a little surprised that Jason baited him out so early. It was so slick, man. He threw up this incredible arm bar. All the props to him.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, not trying to take anything away from Zach at all, because I love Zach. He's a great kid, great deal of respect for him specifically. And I don't know anybody that's ever had interactions with him that has a foul word to say in that process.
Yeah.
It's more or less, I want to amplify Jason being able to get himself a little bit back on track. And this is something that I think, or at least I hope, allows for him to take the next step in turning the corner from some of those mental demons and whatnot in the process to say, hey, you know what? I can still go out there and win under the lights. I can still go out there and go through the process and compete and find a way to get my hand raised.
He did it, man. He absolutely did it. And I gave you shit earlier because on the broadcast I was complaining because when you were going through coaches and you had mentioned Zach's coach Steven, you didn't call him Professor Paprocki, and he is a black belt. So I was bitching and bitching. However, it's okay.
Well, I got you. Because your first reference is Steven, you didn't call him Professor.
He wasn't coaching.
Still counting. I'm still counting it. Still counting.
No, I will never call it Professor Paprocki outside of coaching.
Not even if there's a fight.
Not even if there's a
that 55-pound no-gi matchup, that was between a couple of ladies who went out there and they had a very hard-fought match all the way through regulation, through both periods of overtime. Alexandra Anderson out of the Sanctuary picked up the decision from over Alexa Johnson in the process. That was a matchup that was actually really impressed with Alexa's defense in the process. I thought that was a valiant effort from her on that side. I mean, Alexandra was attacking and she was on the offensive over pretty much the majority of the contest. But again, I think that it's a little bit, we have to at least highlight Alexa's resilience in the process and that she didn't break in any moment. And what I mean by breaking is there's sometimes when you have someone who is attacking for more than 10 plus minutes by the time that you get into both of those overtime periods, that after a while, sometimes you're just like, hey, like I'm tired, just take something. There might be an arm, there might be a potential head arm, or starting from the back with the rear naked choke in overtime periods. There's some cases where, all right, well, maybe everybody else out there doesn't know that, I just basically gave you this rear naked choke, but you know it in your head. You're like, hey, I just want to be out of here. I want no more part of this. And to her credit, she battled all the way through the final bell.
Sure. I noticed that Johnson seemed like kind of a slow starter each round, and with certain fighters, certain competitors, they don't give you a chance to slow start. Alexandra, man, she is a competitor. She hops on you, and shout out to her outfit, man. It was gorgeous. It had like her symbol on it, her name. It was beautiful. So I loved it.
Yeah, it was a great match there in that in that spot there on the main card. The next matchup, we had one of the showmen of the entire show. I mean, and when I say showman and the level of showmanship, it's if you look at the promo that Mr. Alaska Ben Bennett did on the lead up to the card, as well as when he came through, he did a whole crowd walk and a crowd run through in the process. But just unique. He stands out with his own brand of humor in the process. He is very unorthodox with his approach and his promotion or the way he builds himself, if you will.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you gotta love Ben Bennett.
Yes.
I mean, the entire match, he was having fun in the process. Silas was a valiant competitor and he was strong within his defense.
Yeah.
But I think that it was observable within the first few minutes of the matchup, first couple of minutes, that I think Silas realized that he didn't really have anything that he could threaten Ben with. So he just went into Fort Knox defense mode. And credit to him for not getting submitted and also not breaking in the process, taking it all the way to the end.
Absolutely.
But it just looked like he went into a full-on defense mode that, hey, like if I just kind of shell up, I can't give you anything, so you can't take anything.
I also wonder how much the moment kind of got to him, being on our stage for the first time, being in our cage, having the walkout. I I do wonder how much that played a part too. If you look at Ben, like being under the heights is where he's comfortable too.
Oh, yeah.
I do want to see more jujitsu from Ben. Every time that I see Ben, he's got such good grappling, such good pressure. Haven't really seen much jujitsu from him. I was looking at kind of who he could go up against next that might pose more jujitsu, and I was thinking Donald Rose now. I thought maybe somebody who kind of rolls under him, threatens, kind of pulls that back out. I don't know.
Not a bad matchup idea. Now, I do know Donald might be out for a little while. He just put up yesterday that he had to pull from Nogi Worlds.
No, what happened?
Yeah, I had some injury of some sort. I can't remember exactly what it was, and hopefully it's something that he has a quick turnaround and recovery for. Because he's a tremendous jiu-jitsu athlete, and I like what he brings to the table. He's one of those guys that you know what his game is, you know what his game plan is, but it's like the old line in Remember the Titans, 44, 43 blast. It's like Novocaine works every time.
Yeah.
Like, it's your job to stop it.
Yeah.
And somebody like him who has a strong game and a strong arsenal of attacks, that could be an interesting styles clash or a matchup in that process. I think that there's probably a couple of guys in that mix that could be a valiant competitor for Ben, but it's also sometimes when we factor in the wrestling, the cage work, all of that, and somebody who has just, I like to think that in a lot of ways, there's good grappling tend to have an advantage in our format because they know how to work off of the wall, or they're so used to working off of the wall on a regular basis. And also in fighting, they're comfortable being on, or they work their way on top, especially the fighters who have good grappling but also have a strong base of wrestling within their skill set.
Yeah.
They're not willing to accept the position from the bottom. They're not willing to concede that positional battle to work from the underneath, because in their world where they typically cut their teeth,
On top is king.
if you are on the bottom,
Yes.
it's basically at this point, being a bottom player in MMA, you're gonna either take a lot of damage in the process and you're gonna get beat up, or you just don't last long.
Right.
There's very few guys like a Paul Craig who can stay there in the mix for as long as they did, but also that being said, Paul Craig took a lot of bad knockouts and a lot of damage in the process as time grew on. So just something that I think favors, again, MMA guys within our skill set or within our rule set and our format, just because they're so used to playing that top position.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And also, if they're not willing to go into the legs, well, it's on you to get to my legs. If I have strong hips and if I angle you down and I don't let you get there, and that's all you really have to threaten is getting inverted or going to the legs, well, then you're also the person who's kind of at a standstill and like, oh shit, what the fuck do I do now?
Absolutely.
But moving along from that, we had a fun matchup back and forth. These guys scrap like cats and dogs. This was between Tyree Wolfolk of AMAG against John Sparks of Evergreen Jiu-Jitsu. Real chippy at a couple of points. They're kind of talking to each other throughout the matchup. But Tyree is a guy who he has a strong amount of experience between his MMA fights. He has a ton of Muay Thai fights. He was very strong within the clinch, or within those, well, in jiu-jitsu or grappling, what we're calling our collar tie or tie-up positions.
Yeah.
But he was basically working a tie plunk.
Yes.
In a lot of those positions. And I think that that's where he had a significant advantage against John, who I just don't know necessarily, again, that when you're doing it as a fighter and the difference of you losing this clinch is you possibly getting elbowed or punched in the face, you're going to be a lot stronger in that tie.
Absolutely.
And I think that there was a noticeable strength advantage for Tyree in some of those positions. And I think that that's what won him the match. It wore John down throughout regulation for him to go and pick up that head and arm triangle. And also, kudos to him for recognizing, hey, I can work with the wall here.
Yeah.
He used the pressure of the wall, putting his feet up on the fence to leverage more pressure on his head and arm choke.
Yeah, man. I mean, he told us in his pre-interview that he was going to be unique, and he was. I felt though that Sparks was pretty comfortable off of his back.
Mhm.
It was definitely MMA versus jiu-jitsu. I definitely felt like Kyrie understood the wall better. He understood that clinching very well. John definitely used his hooks very well. He definitely likes to play guard. It was a very fun match. I would love to have them both back on. Kyrie said in his post-fight interview with Clive that he has a new goal. It is to one day be on a CJJC main event. So I love it.
Yeah, I love that. And I also just give Kyrie some credit too in that his last MMA fight didn't go his way because of a disadvantage in the grappling side of things. Him taking the martial arts approach or the martial artist approach of saying, you know what, I'm going to go step into the fire solely with this part of the game.
Absolutely.
And take away what my best tools are in the striking and just go grapple. Let me go round off this part of my game and let me get better where I have some deficiencies as compared to where some of my strengths are. And being humble enough to take that approach, I think deserves some recognition as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Next matchup from that was our first bout of the main card. This was the championship of our four-man bracket. Folks, I thought looked tremendous throughout the day.
I had an opportunity to sit by a cage for like a second in Josh Oaks' match here, and what I noticed was, man, when his coach said do ABC, he did ABC. And it was like his coach would say something and he would just handle it. And that was cool.
Definitely. I mean, I think it just speaks to some of that Onyx program and what Isaiah and Jesse Wright have going on over there. Isaiah is one of those guys who leads from the front of the pack.
Sure.
He has competed multiple times himself across various combat sports disciplines over the last year alone, whether it is black belt super fights, that is Muay Thai, that is MMA title fights all across the board. So I think it's also something to be said when you have somebody who you know has been through the trenches or is also actively going through that with you.
Yeah.
And Jesse also just got an MMA win recently. So
yes, he did.
Sometimes momentum is contagious.
Absolutely.
So just that forward progress and always consistently grinding together, I think that plays an advantage. And they also have a tremendous program as far as their curriculum as a whole. He did have 2 different unique submissions throughout the course of the contest. So that's where I think that Josh Oaks came out there and he looked phenomenal.
Yeah, Kobe Tafoya, man, came out of nowhere too. I didn't know anything about him prior. I definitely know him now.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah.
Certainly. And then moving on to our headliner from the prelims, we had a 150-pound nogi matchup going on between Anthony Bendy of DCO. He's a multiple-time veteran of the CJJC cage across our pro shows or our big cards as well as the grapple games. Yeah. Anthony Bendy he's a funny guy. I like Bendy on the cards. He's really unorthodox with some of the stuff that he does just because he's kind of got alien dimensions for the division. Yep. His nickname is Rubber Band Man, but he just really should shorten it to Rubber Man because his joints are completely rubber in the process. Yeah. His physiology is essentially like his last namesake. He's Bendy. Yeah. There's been times where we've seen him in some crazy entanglements and configurations, and he is able to work his way through things. He didn't have to really work his way out of any sort of trouble in this matchup. I feel like this matchup against Darren Hilton was a pretty dominant performance from start to finish. Yeah, I agree. He gets the rear naked choke, and I think that was a good building point for him going on into his next endeavor here. Yeah, and
Theo Robinson is calling him out. So he said, I want him next. So I said, okay. Take Anthony Bendy.
Theo's got a big MMA fight coming up here in a couple of weeks. He's fighting for my Colorado Combat Club 135-pound title there. He's taking on Tristan Harrison. Theo is a guy who he's a spark plug. Like that dude has he has no shortage of energy of all sorts of the spectrum. Sometimes he could be a little bit on the let's tone these antics down a little bit, but that also that's just kind of him when he gets dialed in and tuned up, and that rage, that aggression, that whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
also fuels the way that he goes out there and fights or grapples like his head's on fire.
Yeah, yeah. So what I like about that matchup is you've got like very high level grappling takedowns against Fendi, who also has wrestling too, but definitely has more of like that jiu-jitsu style. So put it on the next match.
Yeah, and just for the record's sake, because he's competed in our cage as well, I think that Theo might have one of the fastest level changes on his single leg that I have seen in quite some time on this.
Man, that kid moves. I train over at Genesis on Thursdays, and that kid is running around everybody, carrying people around, twirling them, running, jogging. He just has it all, man.
Yeah, there's you're not going to be able to out wrestle him in a lot of sequences just because he does have legit high level D1 caliber wrestling and speed kills too. Yes, at the same time. But moving along from that matchup, we had our lone match in the gi for the day. You had a 130-pound gi blue belt matchup that went on between Junior Zamora and Desideo Belfon out of Catalyst. Junior had a game plan from the very beginning. I mean, he was a man possessed, going for the legs right away off the rip.
Immediately. Yes.
He said it in his post-fight interview with our man Clive that he was a little bit upset that he didn't get the submission as fast as he wanted. He didn't get the exact leg entanglement and submission that he wanted, but still, it was a quick submission that he was able to go and get that toe hold.
Yeah. I know that he was super pumped about our rule set. I know that as a blue belt competing, you don't always get to go after some of the things that he did. So I knew going in that was his goal. So
yeah, and that's just a kudos to our rule set that I love, and I think that's why maybe it's the best bridge aside from doing a smoker type of fight where you have to add in getting punched in the face, because there's a lot of guys who are tremendous grapplers. Once you start adding some strikes in, it changes the game big time. What we do bridges that gap significantly, because it doesn't matter if you're an 0-0 amateur going out there and making your debut. Someone can go heel hook you right away.
Absolutely.
Somebody can go and slam you in the cage. Whereas if you're just used to competing in solely a jiu-jitsu realm, well, we've seen some times where it's just a blast double.
Yes.
It's not a slam by any means. And depending on which jiu-jitsu format it is,
it throws you off.
You get disqualified.
Yeah.
You'll get disqualified for just having a hard takedown in the process, or there's certain submissions that are limited in what you can go out there and apply. If you're trying to fight everything, you have to be able to be prepared to go with everything. And so even a guy who's going out there and competing in just the gi in this sense with Junior, I love that he was like, oh, okay, I've been working on this stuff for a long time. I don't always get a chance to use it when I go compete in these different tournaments.
Yep.
Let me go run it up.
Yep, he did.
So I love seeing that there. We did not end up having a consolation matchup for the bracket. Hopefully all the injuries are very quick to heal in that process from the first matchup. It was due to the heel hook that Josh had applied that got the finish.
Absolutely.
But, hopefully, again, we never want to see anybody have long-term injuries or anything in that process. So hopefully it's a quick recovery there. The next matchup, though, man, I got to give a shout-out to my boy, Seth Tumbleson. Seth Tumbleson out of Factory X and Evergreen Jiu-Jitsu. Seth goes out there and has another spectacular performance for us in the CJJC cage.
Yeah.
Goes and picks up a victory by Darce against Caden Ashby. Caden's a tremendous competitor himself. We had him before, and he's going to be a guy who continues to grow and have a very quality grappling career.
Yeah.
But Seth Tumbleson, at just 19 years young, it is a problem when he's on the mats and grappling. He's working his way to getting into actually fighting with MMA. He's on the fight team at Factory X, just hasn't had an MMA fight so far.
Okay.
But he's family with Professor Scotty Miller.
Yep.
Their brand of mixed wrestling, or what sometimes they'll call like catch jujitsu, because it's such a blend of each of those two things.
Yep.
It's filthy. It is absolutely lethal in the process. Scotty's been putting out a tremendous amount of content lately with some different techniques that he uses that are applicable in both grappling as well as in some MMA sequences. On his Scotty Jiu-Jitsu page, he's a product of the Neil Melanson system. And if any of you guys don't know who Neil is, well, some of the big time guys through yesteryear from fighting or into grappling, such as multiple division UFC champion in Randy the Natural Couture. Yep. That's a big product of him. I got the chance to see one of his seminars that he had when he came down through our gym a couple of years ago, or maybe about a year and a half, whatever the time was. But just a wealth of knowledge and stuff that it works. There's not a whole lot of fat that you have to trim off of some of the techniques, because sometimes in grappling we have guys who they're very artistic with their roles, or they're very artistic with their style. And sometimes when you have a little bit more of those intricate elements, when you're dealing with a strength disadvantage, or when you're dealing with someone who is just maybe a hammer at times, there's limits where some of that flowy aspect comes from, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you have someone who's a little bit more of a hammer, and you can just run through it that way. And I think that that's basically a big part of what their strategy is, hey, we're looking for the kill and we're going for it.
Yeah, man. I thought Caden Ashby kind of threw everything that he had. I was pretty impressed with, he inverted, he threw up some triangles. He really threw a lot at Seth. What impressed me about Seth was Seth clearly understands the cage, and he understood putting Caden in that dead space where his guard doesn't really apply and it isn't as threatening. And he stayed there and he maneuvered through that so well. And then as they were transitioning through, man, he just started threading arms through. He handled himself very, very, very well, as always.
Certainly.
I like Seth.
The next matchup from there, we had a 130-pound no-gi matchup. We had Ray Maldonado picking up a rear naked choke against Cameron Santos. That was a back-and-forth matchup for a little while there, but, you thought for a second that Cameron was going to be able to maneuver himself out of the rear naked choke. Unfortunately for him, it was just a situation of a very timely adjustment.
Yes.
Was something that just sunk that choke super deep, and he was able to pick up the finish there.
I also noticed when you're blue belt and under and you're being threatened, sometimes you almost forget that your upper half can be fighting hands while your lower half can also be pummeling their hooks. I noticed that Cameron almost got blindsided by the upper half, and he stopped threading through his hooks. Again, man, that's just something that you have to go through. It'll probably never happen to him again. I also wanted to comment, Ray's haircut and his part, he looked so handsome the whole match. No matter what was happening, Ray just looked good, man.
Well, I'll actually go ahead and get
perfect haircut, Ray. You look great.
The next matchup, we had a 125-pound no-gi matchup of a couple of teenagers who had such a high level between Michael Ortiz and Corey Lobato. Yeah. Corey Lobato was able to sink that rear naked choke. Corey Lobato was able to sink in that rear naked choke there. And in the process, though, with the transition, man, he had a crazy ninja choke setup that it got a little bit of blood drawn in the process. Michael is a tremendous competitor himself in his own right. But this day belonged to Corey Lobato in the process, and man, I look forward to what the future for these two young grapplers brings.
Corey looked like there was no other option but man, from the very start, he was trying to grab things. His guard, his legs just kept re-guarding and re-threading through. They both looked so good. Corey Lobato took Jesse Fabiano on a very, very short notice match. I kind of want to see that match back and giving them both a full camp.
Yeah, I would love to see it. And these guys, just in general, they're so young. They're going to compete against each other a ton of times more as time goes, especially depending on if they stay around the same size.
Yes.
There's going to be a lot more times where they see each other in the future. So I look forward to what those two young men bring in the future. The next matchup from that, we have Declan O'Brien taking on Quentin Button. Now, Declan O'Brien, dude is a physical specimen, man. That
Yeah.
guy's quads are, his two quads are basically like the same size, or excuse me, one of his quads is most people's two.
Yeah, that's true.
Like just pure diesel and horsepower throughout the majority of that grappling match. But I also want to give a shout out to Quentin Button because I feel like he took him all the way to the final bell. This was a decision victory for Declan, but Quentin showed himself very well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was impressed with them both. I'd be happy to have them on again.
Certainly. And then next matchup from that, we had 175-pound no-gi matchup. This went on between Langdon King of Logos over CJ Chavez of Genesis. This was one of the highlights of the day as far as the finish goes.
Absolutely.
This was a tech sub rear naked choke. I mean, had him spitting and gurgling in the process. That was, again, hey, sometimes you live by the sword, you die by the sword in the process, and that was one of those moments for Langdon King where that's going to be a highlight that he can play for forever and say, like, man, like this was a big feather in my cap.
Yeah, man. He's also had some tough matches on CJJC. This was his first win, and it was done in a very dominant fashion.
Next matchup from that, I believe we had our Jorge Venzer matchup against Ben Gerson. This was a very tightly contested bout between the two of them. Now, personally, I didn't agree with the decision. I can understand where it can go either way based off of how close that it was.
Yes.
But I think that if we're looking at what was the most defining point of that matchup, it was the big slams that George had.
Yeah.
George had the biggest slam of the entire show, the biggest, most powerful, booming, erupting takedown of the entire event.
Yes.
Ben also did very well with his pressure and working off of the fence.
Yes.
Ben had a takedown that was secured of his own, but again, when we're talking about splitting hairs in a very tight matchup,
yes,
I, from my vantage point, start to look at, okay, what were the defining moments? And I think that George Venzer had more of a defining moment.
Yes.
But it's not to take anything away from Ben, because Ben is a kid he's a tremendous competitor in his own respect at the early stages of his career. He competed across MMA, Muay Thai, and submission grappling over the course of the last year.
Yeah.
So I want to give him all credit and respect too in the process.
Absolutely.
If you were just asking me, well, hey, I'm also I got to rally for my guy too in the process.
Sure.
So George, again, you heard what I said about him on the pre-show, and I love that kid through and through. He's a great kid to have around in the gym.
Absolutely.
And I just, being fair and removing myself from the subjective aspect of it, being objective, looking at that matchup when it was
yeah.
Defining moment was the slam.
Yeah, I watching it a few times. It was pretty close. I do feel that Paul was swayed by the cage control that Ben had. And man, Paul is you've got to pass half guard or guard. If you don't, Paul doesn't count it as control. And so I feel because Ben was so composed when he did get taken down, he handled his half guard very well and he got up each time. I think that's what swayed Paul. Yeah.
Again, it's fair points, but when we're talking about decisions at times, it's there is a level of interpretation or what you might be factoring in as far as your individual criteria there.
Yeah.
And when it was that close to where, again, we're splitting hairs as far as what the moments were of the matchup. If you're talking control time versus, okay, a takedown or whatever, well, then that's going to come down to the person who is dropping the gavel for the decision.
Absolutely.
That's going to come down to what they saw or what their interpretation for that highest point was.
Yeah. Yeah.
The following matchup from that was Ray Mendoza of DCO taking on Martin Arenas. This was a chippy matchup from the start.
It was feisty.
Yeah, both of these guys. We said it beforehand, though, too, that this was going to be a lot of piss and vinegar between the two of these guys, a couple of young dudes that had a little bit of a hot head streak in them, and they were headbutting each other. They were talking smack the entire time, and it was a good victory in overtime and a recognition of where the position was for Ray.
Absolutely.
I think that it was also, though, a lapse in awareness or maybe letting the emotions get a little bit the most of him with Martin in the process, because right as that second period of overtime started, there was someone from the crowd that was kind of chirping at him.
Okay.
And so he like is kind of looking off into the crowd at, whoever had said it or whatever. And
Yes.
not realizing, well, you're already having somebody on your back, and it's a quick transition for someone just to go from that seatbelt grip and to take the throat.
Yep.
Instead of being like 100% in tune with, I need to be able to defend, counter, and escape right away, right off the rip.
Yeah.
I think that it was a combination of both of those things. It was awareness for Ray to know that, hey, you know what? Well, he's not completely here right now. Like his head is in other spaces as well.
Absolutely.
I'm pouncing on it. And he did. Credit to him in that process.
Absolutely.
Also a building block or a knowledge knot for our team in the process to stay in the moment. Don't let other external factors or even your own emotions throughout you guys being chippy, don't allow that to affect your approach within the matchup.
Yeah. Especially, I think you and Trevor were talking about it very well on the broadcast. These are things that you just have to go through and you learn. And as you compete more, it's harder to get you fired up. Things aren't as personal either. So I think it's a really great showing from them both, and they can both grow and go on from here.
Certainly.
Absolutely.
And that was the last of our scheduled bouts through the day. We did have our 4-man bracket, the initial rounds of it. We, as mentioned, we had Kobe and Josh Oakes winning those first round matchups.
Yeah.
Both good showings, both had submissions in those first rounds. Overall, just to recap this post show here, tremendous day of grappling out there.
Absolutely.
A lot of great and entertaining matchups, a lot of energy from the crowd in the process. We also had, in addition to Dustin that we already mentioned, we had another black belt as well as longtime UFC veteran in the community, Chris Guapo Gutierrez, jump on the call for just a little bit of time. And Chris said the same exact thing. And I saw the entire, he was sitting cage side or right past the guardrail on one of the ends. And there were fans coming up to him and taking pictures all day long. And, I just love seeing that some of these guys who they were at one point at this level. And then now, for them getting some love and some recognition out there, because Chris is a very private person. I'm really close with Chris. He's a private guy. He doesn't go out and about a lot. He's very, very much to himself.
Yeah.
But him actually kind of, going out into the public and being around some people and then them going and recognizing him and then showing some love, I loved seeing that because he had an ear-to-ear grin and smile on his face the entire time. So that's something that I like to see, and that's just my personal note to it, or maybe the personal attachment to the situation. And so thank you, Chris, for hopping on for the call for a little bit too, especially when I know that getting on the mic and or on camera and talking is something that you normally are like, oh no, I gotta do that shit, but being willing to come on and do so. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that.
Yeah. I also wanted to give a huge thank you to our crowd. Anybody who came. I run the upfront, and I have some crazy stories each show about some wild interactions that I have, and this was the most pleasant crowd that I have had ever. So everybody there was there for a grappling party. It was awesome.
That about wraps it up right here. So, Kat, any final words before we head off for this post show?
Yeah, man. Go to jujitsuclub.co. We have a scouting report application. We have a Grapple Games coming up. It's going to be January 2nd. It's going to be like a private, closed event. And essentially, you are competing to get onto our larger card, CJJC 29. And that show is going to be on February 7th. We are doing our second annual Grapple Bowl. And that also, we have applications for that also. So, 2 shows coming up, Grapple Games January 2nd and CJJC 29 February 7th. Both of those you can apply for on jujitsuclub.co.
Also, make sure that you smash that like, share, and subscribe button, whether it is on YouTube or whether it is on any of the Instagram or various social media platforms out there. That is at the CJJC Cage. I'm Jordan Kurtz, sitting here alongside Paprocki. This has been the CJJC 28 Grapple Party post-show breakdown brought to you by Matt Rats.